Welcome to Conversations from the Heart, honoring Andrew Cohen through our stories. My name is Daniela Bomater. I was a student of Andrew's for 17 years, and for the past 9 years, I had the privilege of living and working alongside him. This series is a tribute to his life, his teaching, and the evolutionary fire he sparked in so many of us. Through these intimate conversations, we remember not only the man, but the depths of transformation he catalyzed in our lives. May these stories keep his legacy alive, honoring the sacred thread that connects us and allowing his voice to continue resonating through ours. So welcome, Tim. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And
lovely.
Thank you for agreeing to this conversation about
I was so
Andrew.
happy to hear of the idea and be able to participate.
Yeah, and you're actually the first one I have this conversation with, so it's
okay.
also very new to me. And but it's great. I was thinking Tim is actually the perfect one to have this first conversation. And I would probably want to start with just if you would want to share how you met Andrew and what struck you in this meeting, if there was anything, and how your relationship then evolved over the many years that you were with him.
I had this totally explosive kind of meeting with Andrew because so I'd decided to uproot, this is in 1991, I decided to uproot my life in London, and I'd gone, as part of that sort of decision to pursue my spiritual interests, I decided to go to work in the Krishnamurti school in India. And concurrently, as I made that arrangement, I met Andrew in London just one evening at a teaching, and I heard that the teaching holiday time I had at the school coincided with the retreat that Andrew was leading in Bodh Gaya, Bihar. And so I took that as a spiritual sign and went to the, I joined the retreat sort of midway through or a little way through, went and came into the satsang in the tourist bungalow. And Andrew asked me why I'd come to him in the middle of the satsang. And I was just this naive character at the time. And I just said what I was thinking, and so I said, well, I'm thinking of becoming your student, just sort of straight up like this. And he literally exploded in. He said, "Do you know how tough a teacher I am?" He said, "Do you have it? Do you have any idea how tough a teacher I am?" And it was like this cosmic cannonball coming out of nowhere. And I very tremulously replied, I know I need someone like that, which is exactly what I thought and was true also for me. Because I knew I wanted a tough teacher, somebody. I felt so afraid of the spiritual dimension that I wanted a tough teacher who would push me, what I call push me over the edge, push me from one dimension to another. And so when that cannonball kind of came towards me, it was kind of what in a way I was expecting, although of course it was like, shocking in a way, but it was incredible. And it went on in a way that my whole time during that retreat, I was just oscillating between, recognition of the enlightened dimension and personal fear and terror, really. So that was my meeting with him. It wasn't really a personal meeting. It was more this sort of naive boy meeting this sort of cosmic force. But it was definitely part of me knew I was definitely, because my background was a little bit to do with Krishnamurti, in that my sister went to his school and I was aware of, I met a lot of the people who were interested in Krishnamurti. So I knew the ambience, the sort of spiritual aura around Krishnamurti, and I knew I didn't want it. I felt it was too mild and passive and not hands-on enough. And I knew I wanted what I call a yang teacher, a fiery teacher, a demanding teacher. And so I simply felt I'd found what I wanted, really. Inwardly, while superficially feeling just terrified of Andrew, terrified of the whole community in Marin situation at the time. You know, my terror was it was sort of the other side of the recognition and the inspiration of meeting a timeless spiritual master, and the whole enlightened dimension of existence. You know,
Yeah, I think what you're describing is what many of us experience, that while Andrew was always very clear that he was a radical teacher, and that he would crash the ego or try to crash the ego, whatever we understand in terms of ego. And I think Andrew's teaching has evolved over time in what ego means, and how important it also is to cultivate a positive ego and a good integrated ego. But in the end, his path was a path of going beyond ego. And while he pointed it out all the time, I think nobody at the beginning knew what this actually meant and how demanding it is. Not because he was a brutal teacher, but because the path is very demanding if we want to give ourselves fully to spirit.
Yeah. Well, I definitely, because later, obviously, in the teachings, the whole evolutionary element tells us how strong those forces are within us that you're just saying, and ego, obviously, one of them. So that's why I appreciate the evolutionary element of the teachings, is that you can feel evolution within yourself in the various forces, sexual force, ego force, survival instinct, etc. That it makes it easy to identify, you know, and understand that they're not going to go away. Also, that's to me the critical bit, that the evolutionary dimension, what evolution has put in us, is not going to go away. We you know, we have to know it rather than hope that it's going to disappear.
Yeah, exactly. Would you say that, because I grapple a lot with this question, and I also talk a lot with people about this question, that I always felt Andrew was able to awaken in us an awakening to being and an awakening to becoming, or the evolutionary part, as two distinct awakenings. It was not one thing. And some people had more access, especially, I understand, especially at the beginning, to the awakening to timeless being, to the Advaitin style of awakening, which is real and beautiful and yeah, wonderful. And then there is another kind of awakening to becoming that is distinct, but it's also a liberation. It's as much a liberation as the awakening to being. Would you agree with that? Was there a point when you felt the awakening to becoming was?
Well, I'm at heart, I'm a kind of unorthodox Christian, so I'm all for the becoming engaged, gritty, gutsy kind of spirituality, hands-on, effective, engaged in the world, not so. And I see a clear distinction, as you're describing, between the Eastern kind of being, melting away, detachment, bliss, non-duality, that side of things, and the what I would call the Christian engaged, making something happen, becoming yourself side of it. So I think certainly, as I contemplated this interview with you, I thought that's one of the massive contributions that Andrew made, is bringing these two things together. Synthesis, a sort of synthesis of Eastern spirituality and Western. And then I think each of us has to find, you know, where we lean and what we want. That's my, I mean, I didn't necessarily talk about that as far as I'm aware, but I feel some people lean more towards engagement and others lean more towards detachment, and they're beautiful polarities of spiritual polarities. And the fascinating thing about Andrew was that he could speak about both with equal passion and reverence. I mean, I always remember him saying, because we used to have the retreats that were literally divided into the being 10 days and the becoming 10 days, I think, or 7 days. And he was equally competent in both fields. And he would say about the being dimension, it's, when you're in it, you don't want to come out of it. I mean, I personally wouldn't. I just don't really want the being side of it too much. But he knew it inside out. And I mean, I have thought about how, because well, one of the things I absolutely love about Andrew, that he was never flummoxed or he could go anywhere with the spiritual questions. He was never intimidated by the intellectual side of it, and he wasn't intimidated by the non-dual kind of melting away side of it. So he could traverse this scale. And actually, that's one of the things when I very, very first met him, how I recognized that he was an enlightened man, in that he could move so easily between different, he wasn't fixed in one position. He could move across those dimensions. And also in his manner, in his expression, he was all things. He could be angry and tender and everything. And that was, to me, a hallmark of his freedom. But yeah, I mean, I do think I think the human species is confused about this matter that you brought up, that, the being and the becoming. I really do think, people are so adamant that freedom means one thing, but in fact, we're different people who have our leanings and our preferences, and yeah.
You know that in the last years, he taught the becoming liberation a little bit different, and he taught the authentic self much more as a state that falls on a hopefully positive developed ego structure or individual structure, so that it can come with full force through a beautiful personality, a beautifully developed positive ego, as he called it. So I felt that this was very exciting. He didn't make this extreme distinctions between ego and the authentic self, that it's either or, but much more the liberation was falling through a beautifully developed, autonomous individual that then can shine in the world and express as the best you, the best me. And another thing that really, from what you just said, what came together in the last years, his teaching developed towards something that was able to hold being and becoming much less as a balance, as an either or, let's go being, let's go becoming, and much more as a non-dual reality of liberated existence. And yeah, that sounds like big words, and I'm aware of that, but the felt sense was that it was coming together more and more as one teaching, holding both the being and the becoming in the same profound depths as it always was, but much less as a let's dive into being and now let's go, baby, go, but as a one single embrace of how a liberating life could look like. Beautiful. Which was absolutely amazing and beautiful.
Well, I do remember pretty much the last question I ever asked him in a teaching situation was, it was just like, you can lose yourself in becoming. You can, just as you can lose yourself in being, melt away, you can also lose yourself in engagement. You can sort of lose, in other words, forget your sense of, of being a defined person. You give, because you give yourself completely to your passion or your, and he I remember him replying, well, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how was it to be in his community in the
Well,
times when you were there? Can you describe a little bit what you experienced, how it was
um,
to live the teachings together with other people?
well, when you ask the question, so I think of Fox Hollow, and I think of, I think I was there for 97 to 2003, 6 years. Um,
Mm,
well, you think of two pictures really. You think of the radiant beauty of Fox Hollow and the joy of living with other people, with the quality of our life in all dimensions was off the scale. In just the food, the place, the teachings, the travel, the interior design, the grounds of Fox Hollow, how Andrew dressed, the quality of life, the quality of our life, and how we interacted with one another was, just high quality. And then, of course, you can also think of the crunch moments and the periods of feeling totally divorced from oneself, others, Andrew, and just want to, I never actually felt that strongly that I wanted to get out of there, but one could drop into this kind of or end up in a very, very isolated place, isolated
mm,
from everything that you valued, obviously sort of just resistant to participating, resistant to, and Andrew would be an enemy. You'd feel you wouldn't want to see him on the path because you'd feel within yourself this sort of shying, this kind of hiding away, shame. Um, and then of course, everything in between. But
mm,
uh, yeah, so radiant times, including the utter beauty of Fox Hollow,
mm,
and these very, very sort of tough, taxing episodes that could last for weeks, and for some people, sort of months, years, even. So, but to me, the defining overarching question is to do with gratitude. I'm just grateful, basically. I think in the
mm,
current situation, it's like the question is, are you more grateful than critical? And I'm just entirely grateful. I don't
mm,
really give a shit about the critical side of things. I mean, I
mm,
just feel, having met somebody like Andrew, who took me where I wanted to go, um, nothing could touch the gratitude I feel for that. So I look back on Fox Hollow. Well, also, I mean, I do now look at it as a training ground. It was a training ground, and um, yeah, I mean, personally, I
w-
feel in our species, we don't really have a mechanism by which people graduate from their teacher, and in a
mm,
way, although that wasn't at Fox Hollow, it wasn't really pertinent to the time that I was there. Um, I do feel that anyway, maybe this is a whole different thing, but I mean, it was a training ground. The point is, it was a training ground, and it performed that function for me. So
mm.
I'm deeply grateful for it.
Yeah, yeah. And what you're saying is what was missing, and I have heard that from other people, and I think Andrew would have agreed with that at the end too, that there was no graduation where people could have found their own path and taken what they got from Andrew and run with it
Yeah,
into their own life. Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's a valid point, and Andrew was thinking about that a lot.
But to me,
Where
that's not a personal fault of Andrew's so much. I mean, a little bit probably, but the thing was that this, obviously we were creating this group enlightenment, the faculty of group enlightenment, and the structure required to forge that faculty couldn't adapt to anything else. It was one faculty, it was one structure. And so that's when I think of being at Fox Hollow in those late 90s, that's the structure I think of. You know, we were held in this, you know, this fusion, this point of fusion. And I just think the structure of it couldn't become a different structure. It was just so strong, but it produced the result. We achieved what we were aiming to achieve.
Were you there at the breakthrough time in 2001?
Well, I was on the periphery at that time. I don't know exactly why, but the guys were doing their retreat for a month prior to July 30th, and but some of us, Laurie and I, were working on the property. I mean, we had these 30 apartments that had to be managed for holiday people, and so I was doing that. So I was on the periphery. I was reading the letters that went up at the time, and I was kind of in the vicinity, slightly, if I'm honest about it, glad not to have been in those meetings. I mean, it's a sort of shameful thing to say, but I was quite happy to be. It was a beautiful time of year. It was a fantastic summer, and the sun was out, and the guys were meditating during the day. You know, as a group in the gardens, and I'd see them moving around the property, going to their meditations, and I was just glad I wasn't there. But and then anyway, I sort of was there, because then I started reading the letters that came through about the event that were posted, but that was as close as I was to it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting for me that the whole intersubjective work and the breakthrough 2001, but also the following years of cultivating the intersubjective is still one of the biggest achievements I think Andrew and his Sangha
Absolutely
had.
agree.
Because
Absolutely agree.
For myself, when I found Andrew only in 2008, reading about the potential of creating a new culture beyond ego, people meeting beyond ego, was kind of the hook that pulled me in and pulled me towards Andrew. And I still think it's the biggest potential that there is for humanity. And
I totally agree. Yeah.
And I'm very humbled by everything that happened in Andrew's community, and also in the last years when he restarted teaching, we restarted the collective work, how challenging it is to create this structure beyond ego as a stable structure.
Yeah. But my take on this is that it's there, it's been created, and it exists in the fabric of existence, this faculty. And that's why when you say it's the greatest potential, I just feel that, you know, what a group of people could do. It's ready. The thing is ready. And so all the work has been done. And I mean, personally, I love the perspective on Andrew's life and our life in the community, in which it was all from the very beginning organized by a greater creative force. It was all organized by evolution, right from Andrew's early childhood all the way through his enlightenment, the formation of the community, his vision of this group enlightenment, and then everything we went through. It's all in a way designed and pushed forward by evolution itself and some supra sort of level of intelligence, and it does it does fit together as a perspective that I find intriguing. Well, I find it intriguing and believable also, which means that the group faculty exists. It's the point being that you could say, who owns the group faculty? Well, the creator of it owns it, and the process of life itself, I feel, owns that faculty, and therefore will or might use it in the future. It's sort of not ours. And in a way, I feel that's true to the context and the context we were living in with Andrew. We're in a process greater than ourselves. That was our little refrain. We're in a process greater than ourselves. Well, you know, one can see everything that we did and Andrew did through that lens, and it does make sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And yeah, taking the teaching as they are, that makes total sense.
Yeah,
It's all one
we're the
single process. We are part of this one single process, and everything that is created is public and available from
yeah,
now on, or from then on. I agree. And at the same time, I also feel like our leaning towards it and reinvigorating it and keeping it alive is an important faculty of that process too.
yeah,
I don't take it for granted that it's just there and like in 7,000 years somebody will find it again and revive it again. I like to think that it needs our contribution and our conscious picking up on it and making it real again and again.
yeah. Yeah, because we're responsible for being conduits, aren't we? For being open and
Yes.
receptive, and because the whole thing about the group enlightenment is it's a bigger pipeline, isn't it? It's like a single individual enlightened person is one pipeline, and a group of people is a bigger pipeline. So
Mm-hmm.
more power can come through it. That to me
Yeah.
is the point of it. And we're responsible, and all the work that went in at Fox Hollow and elsewhere was all about sitting in those meetings empty-handed. It was all about that, and all about
Yeah.
our unwillingness to do that was all the friction and the difficulty. So, and it's such a massive thing to sit with other people and be willing to be yourself and to receive and not to have anything ready and prepared, or not to have a strategy of how you're going to be in that group or how you're going to look. It's such a massive attainment. And the meetings, I mean, the meetings, whatever 7 years of meetings, were all about getting us to the point of sitting responsible for our own minds in a group of people,
Mm-hmm.
and being willing to receive a greater kind of a greater intelligence. And it's really kind of,
Exactly.
I must say, it's really funny to think about our protestations and the weird ways in which we would resist doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it does make sense, of course, but it's also, I mean, the challenge of it. Anyway, I mean, it took what it took, didn't it?
It did, and I totally agree with you that it's right there. The structures are there now, and my experience over the last years with the people in Manifest Nirvana, where we did the holonic work, is that accessing that space of pure listening and responding and being more interested in what we don't know yet was much easier than 15 years ago. There was
Oh,
much less ego resistance, and people could do it with some experience, but not years and years, and no pushing needed, and everybody had great experiences. What I felt, what is the edge now in this time that we were with Andrew in our smaller sangha, was more like, how does this translate that then into responding to life, like for real? How can we go ahead by not making it just a 1 hour a week hold-on call where we come together, but what does it mean for all of our lives, and what we
yeah,
can create together, and where we can go together because it felt like this cannot just be an experience. Then it's like a higher state experience, but this has to have an effect, no?
Yeah.
in the real life, and how we show up in our lives. And I feel like that is the next step, how to translate it into, but not to water it down, not like we want to have the same experience with everybody that we meet on this in the street. That's not how it works. It's more like, how do we who are in this teaching and in this path translate it so that it has much more impact on culture and on everything around us.
Yeah.
And that's a big one.
Daniela, the book I'm writing is all about, it's half of it is about what you're saying. It's about, I'm proposing an organization which I'm calling R2, stands for Reformation 2, which is about tackling, basically it's about, I think there are these constructs. There are, like, the Messiah is a construct, that then there are various constructs that need to be dissolved. That they're like lids over humanity, powerful ideas that are false and that are kind of inhibiting people's freedoms. The idea of the Messiah is one of them, and I think, you know, because we need a catalyst for the goodwill and the spiritual learning that exist. And I think that's what you're describing, that something has to come of it. And how does, you know, what is that going to be that's over and above just talking about how great it is? You know, what work can it do in the world? So, so I've, you know, in this book, which is kind of almost written, I've actually come up with what I call a scope of works, which is a list of these lids that are inhibiting people's liberation, freedom, and how a group of people could dissolve them. And yeah, so I'm all for the idea of tangible exhibition and material kind of representation of everything that's been learned and all the work that's been done.
Yeah, exactly. And it's tricky because we also want to be very careful not to allow the ambition of the ego to take over and have ideas about how this could look like. Yeah, like the same thing that is true for our holonic work or the group work of the deep listening and the being available for spirit and be willing to respond to spirit is true for this too. There is a fine line between surrendering to what life wants from us and actively participate in life. And that I found always so fascinating in Andrew's teaching, that we walk that line all the time between being active participant and being surrendered. And it's subtle.
Yeah, but I sort of feel, you know, one of the things I loved about Andrew is the risk element. I mean, it's high risk. His whole life was high risk. Well, that's not, I don't know about his whole life, but you know, I think, you know, there is a relationship between risk and reward, basically. And yeah, so in terms of what you're saying, I sort of feel, well, let life sort it out, you know.
I
I
see.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that a hesitant relationship to that dilemma that you described is the right relationship to have to it. You know, why not sort of be bold, find out? Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, sure. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't describe my position as hesitant, more like humbled by the enormity of how quickly ego takes over. Let's put it like this.
But I think Daniel, because in terms of, you know, the collapse of the community, to me it's just a lesson in that if you actually make contact with God, and you are going to, I mean, because of course it accords with Jesus's crucifixion. He made contact with God, and it came to a disastrous, apparently, end, seemingly, but actually not. What looked like a disaster at the time turned into the actual sort of fulcrum, the nucleus of Western spiritual narrative. And so, yes, so the whole thing about the community's collapse looks like a fuck up and a disaster, and as if Andrew sort of was at fault. But actually, you can see it as evolution just playing its hand and just smashing the whole thing to pieces. And I think it's a far better interpretation. It makes a lot more sense of all the goodwill and the intelligence, the commitment that went into it. It just makes more sense. You make contact with God, God knows what's going to happen, literally. So it's to me, it's proof of touching, of the hand of God and the hand of man kind of touching. And that's why, going back in the conversation a little bit, it's so exciting what you're saying of, well, what's going to come of this next? Because if we're minions what's the phrase? We're pawns in a greater game. It's not necessarily our decision what happens next. That's the perspective I like the most on everything that's happened.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Coming back to Andrew, do you have any particular
memories?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going blank. Yeah, memories of particularly also like fun moments with Andrew, or just outrageous moments, or things that you would like to share?
Well,
because I'm sure you have.
I have thought. So I remember when he told us that we were in a group meeting at Fox Hollow in the Red Room, and it wasn't a formal meeting, it was just a tea discussion, sort of informal meeting. And he told us that he'd been to see Evander Holyfield, the boxer, the heavyweight boxer of the world. I think I don't know if he was champion at the time, but to interview him for the magazine. And I remember just involuntarily kind of crying out in joy at the sort of outrageousness of the wild sort of freedom of the fact that they would interview this guy, this boxer, for the magazine. That was one. And then a sort of funny little one in a way was in Marin, in California. I arrived out there as a kind of newbie. I was terrified of these men's meetings we'd have. I mean, they were terrifying, but I was particularly terrified. And every so often, Andrew, excuse me, he'd just cancel one for no particular reason. You'd just get a message I think we had pages at the time, and it would just be meeting cancelled. And I do remember the utter joy, but it's the same thing of the no limitation element of that he would just decide something for the right reasons, and you'd get this rush of, oh, we're not in a groove here, we're not in a, I mean, we were in a groove, but that he'd break out of that groove.
He was great in that. I agree.
Yeah.
Like when you thought you had figured out how this all works, then to change it, or to cancel it, or to change course, or to, no, we don't do this, we do the other thing.
Yeah.
And it was part of his teaching style to keep us alive and on the toes. And
it's some of these little things because there was another incident, tiny little thing in London. We were having like a formal dinner with him, and I was sitting near him, and I mean, me, and I don't talk much, so I was talking for some reason. He wanted to stop me talking, which itself was a strange situation. But he laid his hand to stop me talking. He laid his hand on my wrist, just across the table. And I just always remember the feeling of that touch, the lightness of the touch. But I mean, there was so much in it. It's kind of like, I don't know, there was so much in it. But and also just the way he moved. That was one of the things I loved around Fox Hollow. The way he moved was so beautiful. He never hurried, never stumbled, he never spilt anything. And it wasn't because he was sort of particularly pernickety about those things. It was just his attention to,
Yeah.
I mean, very graceful in its own way without being kind of affected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do appreciate also how he dressed, I must say. It was it lifted the standard around. I mean, we didn't dress like that. We should have done probably, but he set a standard.
Yeah, and he wanted to set the standard. Speaking of standards, I have to tell you a funny story. Sarah was just, you know, Sarah, yeah, Sarah Thompson. She was here and she picked up your book because
Oh
she
yeah.
didn't know, she hadn't known that you had written a book. So uh, she picked up the book and started to read, and then she started to laugh out loud because one of the first pages you write that food was important from the beginning. And we could very much relate to it because here at Manifest Nirvana we have a really high level food standard of cooking, even in the midst of South India here, and we have organic food, and when people are here, when students are here, we always kind of competed with each other to cook really high standard meals. And also Alka and I, obviously living here with Andrew, had a good cooking standard.
I'm
So
sure. Yeah.
that's similar as how he dressed himself. It was
Mm.
also, he lifted us all up in many ways in terms of standards like food and also looking after our bodies and
Yeah.
exercise and honor this vehicle so
Totally.
that.
Because one of I made some notes yesterday just in preparation, and one of the things was the quality of life, but and also quality of expression and precision, the actual language, and now I'm stumbling around, but the kind of, I mean, also I mean, the fluency. There was a little thing. I watched that BBC Select How I Created a Cult three-part documentary. And there's, Andrew's talking to the camera quite a bit. And right at the end, he lets rip a little bit. And I'm afraid I can't remember the exact words, but it's so typical of him that he would come out with one of his kind of New York kind of demolitions of some person who sort of like, I mean, I remember him calling Stuart a cosmic goofball, but he would come out with these wonderful little cameo descriptions that were just rattled out of him, and they
Yeah.
were just so funny, so New York for one thing, and just so spot on in terms of their accuracy, which is the point I'm making. Is his especially, I mean, obviously in the teachings, his quality of um, he's articulate. That was an amazing thing about Andrew, was how good he was with words, given that he'd had no real education, not much education or formal university education or anything. His use of language was absolutely spot on.
Yeah, it totally was. His use of language, but also his. I was amazed in the last years when he gave satsang here. After the retreat, he gave satsang for the Tiru Westerners that come here. So we had people here in the house for satsang, and the level of precision when he got questions from people, and the precision of his responses to people amazed me every single time. And more often than not, I saw people here coming with a question, and I could feel how Andrew handed them the jewel of their own liberation right into their hands. Not many took it, because people tend to let it fall out of their hands, but it was evident how precisely he could see where somebody was stuck and what would need to happen for them to be liberated on the spot. And that is an amazing skill.
No, I remember him in a teaching in Fox Hollow. I think Gerard asked him a question, and he took the question in and kind of, he sort of synthesized it and refined it and said, "Are you asking this?" And I always remember him doing that. And it was like a sort of purified version of Gerard's question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was really amazing in that respect. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring into this conversation, Tim, from your preparation?
Well, I think well, it's I want to go back to the gratitude. I feel, and interestingly, the gratitude towards Andrew is totally integrated with the gratitude to life for steering me towards Andrew. The two things are kind of, because it's not necessarily that, it doesn't feel very personal, the gratitude, to be honest. It feels more, I suppose you call it spiritual, I don't like the word cosmic, but I just feel so lucky in my lifetime to have met him, and to, and he basically built a bridge for me, to the enlightened field, the enlightened dimension, and put me through my pain. He literally just sort of turned a sort of shaggy old donkey into, well, I don't know about a racehorse, but he kind of, he sort of, well, it took this unrefined character and refined him a little bit. Well, a fair bit, maybe.
No, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and and the way in which that happens, there's a whole mixture of things, isn't it? It's the Dharma and the dialogue and the personal instruction, and kind of it's really knowing somebody who, I remember my first question to Andrew. I was so terrified of him always in the teachings, but I did finally, in the very beginning, this is just a joke, but we were in Schwabenalp up in Switzerland in the mountains in a big retreat, and I plucked up the courage to ask him a question. And the question I asked was, I mean, this is just so ridiculous, but it was, how does an enlightened person interact with a hotel porter? And I think, I don't know, I mean, it's just a total joke. Andrew was totally nonplussed by this question. I think he could not conceive of why I was asking it. But really what I wanted to know was, how is an enlightened person in the world? How are they? And that, in a way, is what I'm most grateful to Andrew for, because he showed me how an enlightened person is in different situations around the world, in life. And I do remember, I wasn't there, but I was told about this, that in Paris, somebody had made a screw up and taken everybody to the wrong railway station. So the group of people who were traveling had to scurry to a different the correct railway station. And somebody told me that Andrew refused. He refused. Well, he not exactly refused, but he just wouldn't run. He wouldn't get caught up in the panic and the anxiety and you know, and it's little incidents like that. Like, it's like, well, how is an enlightened person in
Hmm.
life that
Hmm.
are so useful? You know, they kind of dispel so many big ideas or wrong ideas that one has about what an enlightened life and an enlightened person is.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Uh, I found it impressive here in Tiruvannamalai. We live in a village, yeah, and there are a lot of villagers around us that knew Andrew, and the the way he treated everybody, and they were not students or anything. They didn't really know who he was, but they did feel that he was a very special person, and they all loved it. And when he died 2 weeks ago, the level of reverence and uh, respect and love that they showed to this man that they barely knew, but that treated them in the most appropriate way, that as you describe it, that is an exemplar how we want to act
Yeah,
as awake people.
yeah,
And it has nothing to do with intellect and philosophy and knowing it. It just has to do with how are you with people,
yeah,
and how appropriately can you respond to the world around you.
yeah,
And the people here were, Tim, I tell you, were so beautiful. When we
yeah.
came back with the body uh, Tuesday night, and it's so different than in the West. Even to
Mm,
kind of have a body that you have to treat in a certain way and have to put somewhere, and the people here were just hands on and loving and
mm,
respectful and
mm.
grieving with us. It's Yeah, it can only be described as beautiful, and it had a lot to do with what you just brought up. The way Andrew was with everybody
Yeah.
was amazing. Everybody loved him.
Well, I think when you mentioned there the intellect and knowledge and what have you, because one of the notes I did make yesterday was about what he's taught me about innocence. You know,
Yeah.
and I do feel that he had this. He was an innocent man, in many ways, um, from birth. From well, not from his childhood onwards. He had that. I believe he was somewhat sort of arrested at his early age of about 4 or whatever, due to the bullying of his brother, that he was in a way in a little bit set at that some facets and features of him were caught at that innocent point. And I think that I mean, innocence and emptiness, you can see them as the same thing, can't you? And because there's one of the features of him that I so loved was this unfettered spontaneity, you know,
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
unfettered exuberance, the
Hmm.
laughter and the fun and the mimicry, and it was unfettered, unrestrained, and it was a little bit. He could be like a little bit like a child in that respect,
Hmm.
and then if you sort of take that innocence into an adult form, it comes out in the way that you've just, you know, in how you are with people, and it's essentially the sort of not knowing condition, isn't it,
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
openness and receptiveness and not being fixed or habitual and so I think that's one of the I feel that he taught me through knowing him. This is not sort of obviously sort of direct instruction, but through knowing him, I feel I see that innocence is its own power source, if you like, or its
Hmm.
own
Hmm.
it allows, I mean, it's hard to describe, but it allows something. It's different from the intellect. It's different from knowledge. It's obviously not brute force. It's its own sort of form of expression, I suppose
Yeah.
you could say. But it sort of basically allows something else through, doesn't it? Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Totally.
yeah. And I do feel in the way Andrew was and the way he moved, there was this innocent element to him, this 4-year-old boy in different respects. I
Yeah,
felt I could see. I
very
don't.
much so.
Do you think so?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, no, totally.
I remember he'd walk up to people in restaurants and just sort of ask them what they were eating and things, just like
Yes, exactly.
you know.
No, he had that, and it was very charming and very endearing in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Shall we leave it with this?
sure.
It feels very complete, and
Lovely, thank you.
I enjoyed it a lot.
It's such a fantastic idea to give people to. It's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing all the other people you mentioned. Yeah,
Yes, me too.